Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with News and Views from the Nefarium on Thursday, December 19th. I'm a little late today, folks. I've been fighting Christmas traffic. There's certain areas in the country you just don't want to go on Christmas. The Central Expressway in Dallas, the Major Deegan and the George Washington Bridge in New York, and other places, but I made it. Anyway. This is our last news and views before Christmas this year. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Fröhliche Weihnachten, Joyeux Noël, Feliz Navidad, wherever you may be. We have quite an international audience, so I wanted to make sure and get my Christmas well wishes out to you and to thank you all again for making this a really wonderful year here at Giza Death Star, for the donations, the prayers, the articles that you send, my word, which brings us to what we have today. As you can see, I've got quite a thick little packet of papers, and all of these articles that I'm going to be talking about were sent by regular readers on this site, and I want to thank you for sending them, because it seems that you're all cluing in to the same thing I've been watching, and that is the development of space and the commercialization of space. I want to start it off by reading a little bit about the touchdown of China's Chang'e 3 lunar probe. This is the first lunar probe, folks, that has touched down on the moon in 37 years. So this is quite an accomplishment for China. We congratulate them on that. But there's an interesting little dig at the end of this article. You know, the Western media, the Western press simply can't do anything without a little dig if there's anything competing out there with their worldview. It says this, quote, the space programs, this is Associated Press, the Chinese space program's close military links have raised questions about its ultimate intentions and dissuaded other countries from cooperating too closely with it. In 2007, the Chinese military shot down a defunct weather satellite in an apparent show of force that created a large amount of debris imperiling other spacecraft, unquote. Well, you'll recall that China wasn't the only country shooting at satellites. The United States, shortly thereafter, shot another one down. So it's not just China's space agency that has close ties with the military. And I'm going to argue, I want to argue in this news and views what I've said before. The collateralization and commercialization of space implies inevitably that you have something up there to protect your commercial rights. This is true now. It was true in the age of exploration, which I also want to talk about toward the end of today's news and views. Commercialization is going to imply the inevitable militarization of space, and I'm one of those people who, probably like many of you in this listening audience, believes that space was militarized a long, long time ago. Now, in testament of this fact, we have an interesting article that I'll link on the website and here on YouTube. And it's entitled SST Australia Signed, Sealed, and Ready for Delivery. Now, what this is about is the Space Surveillance Telescope that the United States has developed under the auspices of our good friends at DARPA. That's the Diabolically Apocalyptic Research Project Agency, as I like to call it, or as it's officially known, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's developed a space surveillance telescope which, quote, through its unique combination of several novel technologies, the SST program seeks to enable much faster discovery, please note that word, and tracking of previously unseen, hard-to-find small objects in geosynchronous orbit. The SST will soon move from its current mountaintop location in New Mexico, where the system underwent operational testing and evaluation, to Australia, where it will provide key space situational awareness from the southern hemisphere, an area of the geosynchronous belt that is still largely unexplored. Note the word, okay? Now let me go on with this article. The SST's capabilities are equally impressive. It can search an area larger than the continental United States or Australia in seconds. and survey the entire geosynchronous belt within its field of view multiple times in one night, an order of magnitude faster than traditional telescopes. Additionally, the SST is 10 times more sensitive than current state-of-the-art systems, enabling it to track and find much smaller, dimmer, and more transient objects than its predecessors can. The SST has moved space situational awareness from looking through a drinking straw to a windshield view, where we can see 10,000 objects the size of a softball at a time, any of which could put satellites at risk, said Lieutenant Colonel Travis Blake, DARPA program manager. So in other words, folks, put all that together. They want to watch the southern hemisphere for some reason. They want to find and discover new small objects, and they are able to do this with a windshield view that can capture up to 10,000 objects in a night, scanning an area roughly equivalent to the size of Australia or the continental United States. So in other words, I'm suggesting to you we have here a real kind of dew line version updated to the space age. The dew line, you'll recall, was the Defense Early Warning Network of radar stations along the Arctic Circle to warn the United States and Canada of a missile attack by the Soviet Union coming over the Arctic. This is the newest version, and obviously it has applications to monitoring threats to satellites from other nations and so on and so forth, but I'm bold to suggest it has perhaps other applications, and that is to watch for interference from elsewhere. Now, why do I say that? let's get to the final two articles here. These two articles are posted on the internet by a fellow by the name of Guy Kramer. All right, I will link these to you. And I want to read both what the article says, both articles say, and what they contain, because what they contain is really very, very interesting. The first article is entitled Lunar Mineral Rights Secured by Dr. Joseph Resnick, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy R. O'Neill, Ph.D., U.S. Army retired, and Guy Kramer. All right, and Guy Kramer is the author of the article. Okay, and the lunar article begins by saying, quote, a loophole in space law allows individuals and companies to hold mineral rights on the moon, Mars, and other celestial bodies. Growing concern from scientists that these rights may be held hostage have been alleviated by a three-man North American team, Dr. Joseph Resnick, Dr. Timothy O'Neill, and Guy Kramer, who have acquired the mineral rights for 95% of the side of the moon that faces Earth, the polar regions, and 50% of the far side of the moon. Now, I am going to advance the hypothesis here that this article is a joke, all right? And you're going to be wondering, well, why, if this is a joke, are you going to analyze it and spend any time analyzing it seriously? Well, let me read the Mars article. And the Mars article is headlined, Mars Mineral Rights Secured by Dr. Joseph Resnick, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy R. O'Neill, Ph.D., U.S. Army retired, and Guy Kramer. And again, this article begins in a similar way that the article about the moon mineral rights begins. Quote, Dr. Resnick, former NASA scientist and current consultant to NASA, states, quote, space law does not allow countries to have land ownership on planets and moons in the solar system, but it does allow for the mineral rights to be obtained by individuals and companies, unquote, unquote. All right? Now, again, let's assume this is a joke, that these three men have not legally acquired any of these rights. In all seriousness, however, folks, I have been blogging on the website about the fact that serious articles have appeared in mainstream media, largely in the British press, to a lesser extent in some off-the-beaten-path areas in the United States, but largely in Great Britain, about precisely this issue, the coming commercialization of space and what does it mean in terms of international law. So let's assume that these men are correct that they have legally acquired mineral rights on the Moon and Mars. It's really interesting when you look at these articles, the areas that they say they have claimed the mineral rights. Let me read the sites that they purport to claim on the Moon. The first is the World Heritage Site of the Apollo 11 moon landing. The second is the Lunar North Polar Claim. All right, in other words, the North Pole of the Moon. The next one is the Lunar South Pole. And remember something, NASA sent the LCROSS satellite mission up there and specifically targeted the southern pole of the Moon with a kinetic impact to kick up all sorts of debris and then analyze it. The Moon South Pole Aitken Basin, the Moon Icarus region on the far side, that's on the far side of the Moon, and interestingly enough, the Lasius Somniorum, the Lake of Dreams. And basically, if you look at where they're claiming, it's almost every interesting area that has been the subject of some discussion, particularly the close side of the Moon. Virtually 95% of that entire surface facing the Earth has been claimed by these guys, have claimed the mineral rights to it. So in other words, all the interesting areas. Okay. Now let's look at what they claim on Mars. Okay. The first is Olympus Park. Then the Valle Marineris, basically that big gash that you see on surfaces of Mars running roughly parallel to the equator of Mars. Various historical parks, landers where landers have landed. The Desert Park. Hellas Park. The South Pole, the South Polar region. The North Polar region, and interestingly enough, Terra Meridiani, Arabia Meridiani, and Cydonia. Okay. Now, for those of you who waded through that endless list, Cydonia was the real and obvious punchline, the real kick, because Cydonia has obviously been the region on a local celestial body, be it the Moon, Mars, Saturn, what have you, that has been the subject of a long controversy between Face on Mars advocates and skeptics. I'm one of those in the camp that believes that, yeah, there is sufficient evidence that some of these things that we're looking at on the Moon and on Mars, particularly on Mars, show signs of artificiality. All right. Now, let's look at what's being done. I suspect that what we have with these articles, assuming again that they're jokes, is that they're serious jokes. What we see is the next way that secrecy is going to be maintained in space. And my colleague Richard Dolan pointed out something in a series of books called UFOs in the National Security State. And I hope you read those books if you haven't read them, because they are very profound in their analysis of the effect of the UFO issue on the formation of the national security state in the United States and elsewhere, I would assume, in the West. But one of the things that he points out in another book of his called AD, After Disclosure, and I'm not trying to give commercials for Richard Dolan, I'm simply saying I respect his work and some of his insights a great deal. And he says in that book that one of the best ways that you would keep secrecy, a lockdown on space, would be precisely to privatize it, would be precisely to corporatize it, make all of this proprietary. So in other words, we may be seeing the next stage in the evolution of an ongoing problem that has been there, some would argue, I would certainly agree with them, since the inception of NASA. And I covered this in Covert Wars and Clash of Civilizations by pointing out that the Brookings Institute study itself suggests that there's something else hidden away inside the American space program, a two-track program or a second secret space program, whatever you wish to call it, that is there in order to maintain space secrecy. Now, with the claim of mineral rights that is inevitably going to occur as humanity presses out into space, as we mine asteroids and everything else, this is going to be another layer of secrecy. This could conceivably be said that if you have mineral rights to whatever is under the surface of these celestial bodies, that if you were to find anything there of an archaeological nature, of lost civilizations, technologies, records, what have you, that these would also become proprietary. So this is something to be aware of, folks. This is something I can't stress is very, very important for people to start debating and making a public issue now, because we should not allow that to happen. This should be made available to the public if there's any such things to be found on the moon or Mars. I suspect that what we are seeing, in other words, is not only the extended militarization of space, but we are seeing the extension of space secrecy in a new way, and through kind of a back door, through a loophole in international law as it applies to celestial bodies. And then finally, here's a thought. There's always that little problem that we may be claiming things that other people own, all right? Now, that's way out there, I grant you. But this has to be taken into consideration. And no doubt the powers that be already have taken it into consideration, and hence we have yet another hidden motivation for the militarization of space. So doubtless this is a subject that I want to watch very carefully. I hope that you will too. And if you find anything of interest, share it with us here. And I doubtless will probably be writing about all of this. I may even write about this news and views in a kind of a written summary form on the website. But I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention because I think it's kind of interesting and fun news to share over the Christmas holiday. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's news and views. I want to again wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Fröhliche Weihnachten, Feliz Navidad, Joyeux Noel, wherever you may be in the world. Please have a happy and blessed and peaceful holiday, everybody. Bye-bye, and God bless.